Hi everyone, welcome to Spartan Summit 2024. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Kavya Nair, Director of Product Marketing at 𝐊𝐴, your host, and it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Srinivasan Sekar, Lead Consultant at Thoughtworks. Srinivasan will walk us through an interesting topic, unveiling the power of web performance metrics for testers. Great to have you all join this workshop where we will dig into the core of web applications and explore the game-changing potential of web performance metrics for testers. Srinivasan Sekar is an open source enthusiast and APM member, contributing to repositories like Selenium and WebDriver.io. He's also an expert in testing microservices, event-driven apps, and mobile web applications, having shared insights at various conferences. Before I hand it over to Srinivasan, would request our attendees to show their love and support by using the emojis, which you can find on your screen below. I can see a few emojis coming in. That's exactly what we're looking at. If you have any questions, use the Q&A box to post them, and we'll pick the questions towards the end of the workshop. So please join me in welcoming Srinivasan. Over to you.
Thanks, Kavya. Hi, everyone. Hope you all are doing great. Thank you so much, 𝐊𝐴, for the wonderful opportunity. I'm looking forward for the next 1 hour and also for the upcoming sessions as well. Hope you folks are going to have a wonderful session. Let me quickly share. Cool. Hope you are able to see my screen. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. So welcome you all for the unveiling the power of web performance metrics. Thanks, Kavya, for the wonderful introduction, and that helped me to skip a slide. Cool. Next 45 minutes or so, we are going to talk about what does performance metrics is, why do we need to understand about performance metrics, different tips and tricks to improve performance metrics, and different problems that might arise from the web performance. And also, I am going to do quite a bit of hands-on and also parallel demos as well. Hope the demos, also the live demos, hope all of those demos goes well and you folks enjoy the session. And if you have any questions, do drop your questions in the Q&A panel or also on the chat if possible. I'll try to, I will try to answer as much as possible. And I'm also looking forward to learn from you folks as well. Yeah. So why does performance matters? Any answers? I'm looking forward for your answers on the chat. Why performance matters? Okay. I hope you all are able to hear me well. User experience, stability to get response quick, user engagement, speed is the key, wonderful. In order to ensure speedy flow of the app without lags. Perfect. So first impression, yes, of course, smooth experience, fast response, brand reputation, performance depends on company review, product quality. I think you folks are making my job pretty easy. So I'm happy and feeling wonderful about that. Performance is all about retaining users, speed, scalability, user experience, to be honest, customer experience, conversions, brand reputation. Uh, yes, it's all about web. We're going to talk a lot about web performance and different metrics. What is that going to be changing in about a month from now on, from Google's point of view with respect to core web vitals? So we'll go forward and quickly see what performance metrics we do have. Right. These are some of the core web vitals from Google. One is the largest controlful paint, and next is first input delay, and the third one is about cumulative layout shift. So Largest contentful paint is all about the largest content in your web application that gets painted when your application renders in a browser. So largest contentful paint applies for images that takes a huge landscape in your web browser. And it also applies to any embedded videos and any background images. Apart from videos, background images, and it also applies for the largest content in your web application that gets occupied in the majority of the landscape in your browser, right? And first input delay, which is the metric which is going to be get replaced in a month. I think in 1.5 months to go, this metric is going to go away. Google has introduced this metric some time ago, first input delay. So from the name, first input delay is all about when a user performs a click and how long it takes for the browser to respond, initiate the response. It's not about the complete rendering. It's about how long it takes for the browser to initiate the response. It's the first input delay. It's the first interaction with your browser. First interaction with your web application immediately after browser starts loading, or all the blocking tasks in the main thread of the browser is complete. We'll see in depth about each of these metric upfront. Going forward. And cumulative layout shift, one of the wonderful metric. uh, People might have been frustrated and performed a lot of clicks in your application when your application doesn't respond on time. So that's when we get frustrated about your application and started clicking multiple times on a button or other any other actionable items in your web page, right? Because of the shift in layout, you clicked something and then something else happened. There is a lot of delays. So you anticipated something in your web application, but something else happened because of the layout that gets shifted. Majority of the times we might have noticed this through B2 uh, loading of ads in the application, or rendering probably a bit slower, the component that doesn't render properly on time. So we're going to see about each of these metrics. Before we get to individual metrics, I'd like to highlight what is that it's going to be getting replaced from first input delay, right? Interaction to next paint. Google has announced this metric interaction to next paint probably a year before, and since then it has gained a lot of traction, and it was experimental. It's even now it's experimental, or experimental in Core Web Vitals, but it's going to get stable and going to get it replaces the first input delay. First input delay focus on the first input of your browser, focuses on the first input on your web application. It doesn't focus on any other interactions. Like for example, most of the interaction happens after the first load, right? It doesn't care about any other interaction. The first input delay doesn't adds more values. That's when Google feels it is important to have a metric that measures subsequent or each of the interactions. So that's when they came up with interaction to the next paint. We'll see in detail about how it is different, how is it different from first input delay in detail in the next subsequent slides. And I have demos and also various other contents with respect to how we could find which one is the largest contentful paint in your application by using several tools, several mechanisms. People might have been using Lighthouse here a lot, right? Is Lighthouse the only solution? There is a lot, right? So probably you might have used page speed insights to get some insights from the real data, or the lab data. The real data might reveal quite a lot of things compared to the lab data. Page speed insights is the lab data. It simulates it doesn't simulate your actual user environment. So it is important to understand the customer behavior. So that's when page experience from Google comes in matter from the search console. So we'll see how page experience is different, which is the actual customer data, probably it is important to understand how does the application has been used by your users. Probably they might be in a lower bandwidth, lower network. They might be using a different browsers, or they might have some add-ons which you might not have in your browser. So it is important to understand how your application is being used by your user and give them a wonderful experience on their own scenarios, right? Apart from lab experiments, it is also important to understand Chrome user experience report published in Search Console, or the page experience report published in Search Console, to understand how does the real world experience is, right? Right. Sometimes you might have seen a huge difference when you are doing it through Lighthouse, when you're doing it through page experience report, or comparing these two reports together as well, have a lot of deviations as well. But in general, it is important for us to identify what is the largest content that gets painted in your web application, and how as a QA, or how as a developer you can improve this, identify the bottleneck, improve this, and give a pleasant experience for our users. Let's get started with largest contentful paint. So that's when the largest content, here in your image, you could see that the hero image that we have, majority of the sites, you might see the largest content be image, and it gets loaded little later. So uh, it doesn't give a pleasant experience as well at times, since the image loads a little later. A lot of times you might have seen the layout shift as well, due to the image loading a bit later than expected. The content might have been loaded, the text content might have been loaded up front, where the image loads up later. So there might be a shift if they didn't give the proper width and height of the component, while reserving a landscape in your application, right? So it is important to instruct browser that or give priority to your hero image, or priority to your largest content while it is getting painted, right? So it's a, as you know, it's a single threaded application, and you might have to give priority. If it blocks, then it might block subsequent resources as well that gets loaded in your web application on the browser. So if your browser or if your web application has tons of images, how do you prioritize which image has to be loaded first? How can you instruct your browser? Most of the web browsers are clever enough now, but it is also important for us to instruct, uh, this is the hero image that I would like to load first to give a pleasant experience for my user. Or what are other techniques apart from images? What are other techniques that you could probably identify, or how do you resolve this problem of uh, largest content getting loaded in your application, right? Most of the times we might have run, one more important stuff is, it is important to understand largest content is not just on the home page. It's on each and every page of your web application. Homepage might give you load hero image or the largest content in 100 seconds, 100 milliseconds, but not the case probably in the next page, right? So it might lead to a drop in conversion for our business. So it is important to run, or it is important to identify the bottleneck on each of these web application, web pages, and improve that. So where all the problems might occur, right? So before we get to each of the problems, the one of the important API that we all need to know is Performance Observer API from Google. This helps us to identify how is our application largest contentful paint looks like across each page. Not just for largest contentful paint, this API helps us to identify any bottleneck with respect to all the core web vitals, be it largest contentful paint, um, be it the other metrics like the time for next interaction, or time to next paint, right? That. So it's important to know how performance observer being used by different tools, or do we need to depend upon this tool for understanding what is the largest contentful paint or how much time it took for us, right? If you run Lighthouse, it might give you some milliseconds. If you run any other tool, because it's a field data, probably in lab data, it might give us different input. But end of day, it is important for us to understand how does the real world user experience look like by going through uh, Chrome user experience report or the page experience report from the search console of Google, right? If it's a customer facing and it's a public application, right? So before we get there, I'd like to also show, just turn off my video to reserve some bandwidth. Yeah, I'll start with my website, my portfolio website, right? I have a web snippet. Uh, credits to the uh, credits to the Web of Snippets website that helps us to identify different core web vitals. Let me start with LCP. You could see that it takes around this much milliseconds. If you run it through Lighthouse, it might give you a different perspective. If you run it through Page Speed Insight, it might give you a different perspective as well. But it is important for us to identify first what is the largest content that you have in your web application, right? For example, the largest content here is the image that I have, which is the hero image, which you could see here. Let me run it. Yeah, you see it gets highlighted. It's 258 milliseconds. Most of the times, if you optimize the largest content, if it is a hero image, if you optimize, there are different techniques to optimize it. We will see each and every technique and how you could optimize it. But it is important to identify how long it takes first, so that you can go ahead and see if it is less than 200 milliseconds. That's wonderful. Otherwise, if it is getting into 400, 500 milliseconds or anything above that, it's going to be a very problematic. And we should also see this experience, of loading the web applications, hero image or the video across different network as well. That helps us to, if you understand about your customer, probably you can also tweak in the customer's network profile as well in your Chrome and see how much time it takes under that profile, right? So what is this webperf snippet is all about, right? Webperf snippet is a wonderful curation of uh, different snippets to identify how does the time taken to interactive looks like, time for next paint looks like. If it is, if for example, for time for next paint is less, greater than 200 milliseconds, then it's again a problematic. But most of the times it lighthouse or all comes in a picture little later, so it's important to use something else. Or you can also go through the performance panel that you have in your uh, Chrome dev tools. That also helps us to identify our profile, your web application, to get the sneak peek about how much time it takes for each resource to load in your web application. Is there any blocking resource? Yeah, sometimes it is important to there are three kinds of problems that might lead you into greater LCP. The first one is a server side problem. Server takes a long time to help you with the resources that you have requested for. And next is the network problem. Even if you have tweaked your image, largest content video, or the content that takes the largest space in your web application, if your network is very poor and if your application doesn't load in a low network, then you might also be in a trouble. So it might lead you in, again, it might lead us in the conversion drop, right? So these are the three problems that users might face when we are dealing with uh, again, first one is server. How can we optimize a server? Probably introducing a cache. If it is a static asset, then probably cache it. And probably different application needs different types of caching, and the TTL for the cache might also be a different one. You might also need to use content delivery networks. I mean, probably to maximize your performance. As I said, you might also have to use cache headers with appropriate caching life cycle. I mean, time to live as well. Some of the cases, these are the I mean, max age also depends upon what type of asset is it, how much time you wanted it to be available on browser, how much time you want, I mean, within how much time you wanted to discard it and forcing a discard cache after certain, probably after a certain age. E-tag is one more wonderful thing which will help us in case if you are dealing with a larger files. It also allows the browser to validate if you have any caches that needs to be validated first in your local before going ahead and fetching it from the server. So this will help. And in terms of network, you can use CDNs to also improve the performance. What are other ways? So I said about tweaking your server, and next is about tweaking your network. Once you understand about your customer, you can also go ahead and tweak the network and see how much time it takes for your LCP to load, right? And the third one is about your code base, right? It is important to look at our code base to understand how we are rendering the web application largest contentful, largest content, right? So if you are using a image, there are multiple ways you could load an image, or you can also instruct your browser to load the image in multiple ways. For example, if you take this image, I'd like to show you folks. Have you seen the experience now? It loads the pixels a little later, right? It starts with a lower resolution, and then, I mean, the image is quite big, probably around 10 MB, but the same 10 MB has been loaded in 258 milliseconds, which is wonderful, right? And how is it possible, right? Uh, Here I'm using contentful, which is a static. I mean, you can host all of your contents through the contentful. There are a lot of products that can help you host the images. And one of the wonderful way of loading image that I love about contentful is you can specify that you wanted to load the image progressively. It starts with a low pixel and then start getting the pixel clarity a bit more later, right? That's one of the way that you could help, or you could suggest, that can help you to load your application websites that has huge content. And next is you can also fetch the content with the appropriate height and width. Yeah, and see the way how fast it renders. And most of the times we would have noticed that your team might be bundling the application with your assets as well, right? Which will eventually, over the wire, you might be transferring a lot of images with a huge size that will delay, which will eventually take the DOM size as well. So that will also delay up further. So it is important to understand progressive way of loading it, and also reserving width and height of image that you could load it. That's one. And next is also about lazy loading. If I don't need an image to be loaded in my application upfront, like for example, what you see is what has to be loaded first in your web application, irrespective of whichever landscape that you are in. So identify and see if how the other image is being loaded in your application. I do have quite a lot of images. Right? I have an image here, which could probably is also about a huge image. Yeah, and I'm not sure if you have noticed here. It is also important to use modern I mean, web image standards. WebP is one of the latest modern image standard, which performs which takes a lesser space but loads faster with higher quality. So you can also instruct or identify what type of images that we use, which will probably be a poor image. And next one is, since I don't want this image to be loaded upfront, whenever a user lands on the application, he or she wants to see what is actually there in the content or what is actually being visible first, right? You can also defer the images to load little later. So there is a lot of different loading styles. One of that is loading lazy. So you can also instruct your browser to load certain images later, or also you can give a priority for your browser to load this one upfront, right? The way how you could instruct is there is a CSS tag called fetch priority, HTML tag called fetch priority. If you say hi, browser understands that this is the image that needs to be loaded upfront. So loading all the images with fetch priority I, which means doing nothing. So identifying LCP and then loading that upfront is what matters most of the time, right? Consider I have another web publication here. You could see here, I have an hero image which covers huge of the real estate in my web application. Since it loads a bit later, it might push the content up below as well. And due to this nature, it is also important to provide width and height of these images. So one is about progressive loading, lazy loading. If you are wanted certain images or any of the assets to be loaded little later, prefer lazy loading. And another one is about asynchronous loading. Fetch priority was experimental for a very long time. Most of the browsers currently supports it, and you can instruct the browser to give fetch priority as I. That helps the browser to know that this is a content that I needs to fetch on a priority, and defer the. It helps to defer the remaining contents as well. So that helps from an image perspective to upgrade your or load your web application a bit more better way. And the next problem probably you might have seen is too many fonts in your application. If you have noticed it, then raise it. It is not advisable to have too many fonts in a web application. Probably a two, a maximum three will help sort out most of the problems. Sometimes you might see a default font gets loaded, and then after a few seconds, you will see a different font or the actual font of the application gets loaded. So it is important to optimize fonts as well. So this is another problem. So you also have to figure out what types of fonts or what all fonts that we are using in our web application. Most of the times you can find all of these informations in your network tab, which you don't need to go to Lighthouse instructing few other instructions for you. Sometimes those instructions might not be that helpful as well, right? So figure out how much fonts, how many number of fonts we have, what is the largest content that you have, how long it takes for you to see, or how long it takes for a user to perceive this image, the largest content, right? You can also go through and see how many fonts that we have in our application. Okay, let me open that up a bit later. In terms of font optimizations, right? You might have seen preload, prefetch, and other tags. So we can also instruct your browser to preload certain fonts and pre-connect to external domains. Sometimes you might download fonts from Google. You might download fonts from external server, then hosting it internally. So it's also important to weigh in or figure out where is the font. I mean, where the font that you are using in your application is being hosted, right? So you can also use preload and prefetch, pre-connect to instruct your browser to load these fonts upfront. Yeah, is what I was talking about. You can also preload a website and pre-connect to any of the external domains, and this will help browser to know that okay, I do need to preload this. So we don't see any font fluctuations on your web application. So this is important to understand how much time. I mean, is there any apart from content shifting or content shifting? There might be font shifting as well, right? So you might also have to address that. So see how many number of fonts that you have in your web application and how long it takes for you to load the font. Yeah. Next one is about interaction to next point. Keep your queries keep coming in. I will spend maximum amount of time and also help you folks to address as much questions as possible. So keep your questions coming in. We'll get into that a bit later. Yeah. So I was talking about INP, right? So next thing about INP. So we need to identify the difference between INP. INP is going to be replaced. IMT is going to replace the first input delay. First input delay is all about the initial delay. As soon as the browser loads the web application, the first interaction to your web application, and how long the initial delay is for the browser to start responding. It's not even completion of responding, it's also browser to start responding for your initial, the first interaction. Since it deals with only the first interaction, INP is going to replace that to capture all the interactions. How does your application performs for all the interactions? To explain it in a bit more better way, you could see here. This is how INP is all about. Let's say your browser's main thread has some blocking task, and during the blocking task, you performed an interaction to it. And let's say the blocking task and the input delay solved here. This is what this distance is what all about first input delay. I mean, as soon as the browser starts responding, the browser will start responding here. It doesn't mean that it gets rendered. It's all about the interaction that you have started and the browser that it gets start responding. As soon as you clicked on any of the, um, click can be performed on multiple ways, right? You can do a click, or it could be a keyboard interaction, or it could be a mouse interaction as well, right? So this is what first input delay is all about. But to give a pleasant experience for a user, it is important to identify how does your application, uh, how much, how long it takes for each interaction to take or respond in your application. So they introduce a new metric called interaction to next paint. So it calculates about it's basically a total of input delay and also about you pointer up and or any other you you lift your finger. As soon as the interaction started, it takes time for you to render. It takes time for you to paint, start painting, and the completion of paint. And the browser also does quite a bit of things. If you have GPU heavy actions that performs on your application, it does perform some other attributes as well. After rendering and painting, it does GPU or heavy computational tasks after that as well. So the total presentation delay, processing time to respond, and also the input delay, as soon as you see it on the, as soon as you see it on the device that you have interacted with, it's the total. It starts from the FID and it ends with what you also basically see. Basically the response that gets visible, right? In between this time, if you have done another interaction, the first interaction will be overseeded by the next one, right? It starts calculating from there, right? Cool. This is all about the difference between the first input delay and interaction to next point, right? Most of the times, interaction to the next point is affected due to one thing: blocking resources on the main thread. You might have seen here the FID and any other blocking that gets kicked in will have a huge impact on interaction to next point, right? We'll quickly figure out how we could identify what's the value behind each of your interaction. How long it takes for any interaction that happens on your application through web performance snippets. Let me It's locally running. Let me go through from my website as well. How long it takes for any interaction. So anything below 200 is perceived as good. Anything above 200 is something that we need to look into, which is perceived as an actionable item. So figure out how long it takes for your application's interaction. Most of the times you may not be able to figure out this across many interactions in your lighthouse. Lighthouse can give you a picture for probably some of the interactions that initially perceive, but it doesn't help us to identify for all the interactions. So I think kudos to the people who has created this web of snippets that could help you to identify each of these interactions in your web application, how long it takes, right? PageSpeed Insights might also give you, but it's again from a lab environment. You can also identify a detailed field report, how your interactions are happening from Google's Search Console. Google Search Console has a page experience report that helps you to identify how long it takes for each of your interactions, how long each of these interactions are taking. You can go through the page experience report from Search Console and also identify how long it takes or how your application performs on the real environment. So if there is an opportunity for you to register your applications under Search Console, there is also a wonderful statistics that 96% of applications doesn't get indexed by Google because of some or other problems, right? So it is important to understand how does your it could if you don't have an opportunity to go through Search Console report, probably go through your analytics. You can also sneak in your performance snippets through any of the analytics that you have integrated on your application with. Could be a GA or it could be anything. It could be plausible. It could be Bursell zone analytics. Anything for that matters. You can uh, identify how your interaction is being perceived by the real users on the real environment, right? Yeah. Now, let's say we have an interaction that is taking a huge time. Now we could see how we optimize it. Most of the times it happens due to any of the render blocking resources, right? And yeah, let's go ahead. So render blocking resources, who are those render blocking resources in our application? It could be a style sheet, it could be a JavaScript, or it could be any long running task. So now that and it could be an external library as well. Now that we know these are the items that could cause or block resources to load or have an impact on interaction to next pane, how do we identify a long running task? Or how do we identify which portion of JavaScript takes a huge time? Or is there a solution to it, right? So most of the times, long-running tasks can be identified by using a Performance Observer API or also through Performance Observer on the Chrome DevTools. You can profile your application using DevTools performance and identify how long, which is the longest task, right? So yeah, you can profile it using the performance. Can also pursue how long it takes for each of the resource to be loaded. And one more wonderful place is the waterfall model that your network gets in, right, to load any of the resources. And also, it is important to identify if there is any JavaScript that is unused by your web application page. If there is any, then we should, it is applicable for style sheet as well. For those, you can also go through PageSpeed Insights. It will also help us to identify is there any unwanted or JavaScript available in your application, right? There could be a lot. For example, if you see, reduce unused JavaScript. While loading the assets, we are using a JavaScript, which might be not required, is what PageSpeed Insights and Google's Lighthouse feels. So these are the pointers that helps us to identify what takes a lot of time. How do we optimize interactions? Right? Reducing unused JavaScript and reducing unused style sheets will help us to boost our time to interaction, or also interaction to next paint as well. Yeah. External libraries. So most of the times applications have external libraries. One, you could offload certain libraries being loaded upfront on the main thread and offload it to external libraries to load a little later, depending upon the use case that you are in. Right. Other solutions probably are you can also reduce the identify and reduce style sheets, basically defer certain resources, remove unused style sheets, or compress the CSS. And you can also inline the style sheets. JavaScript, probably you can identify if there is a place where you could reduce the JavaScript. But it is important to identify what it takes, how long it takes. So you can first run through the application with different. And let me go through it. Yeah. Run a snippet and identify for all interaction how long it takes. That's the first step. And next is identify what it takes, what resource is taking a long time. Can also figure out what is the input delay, what is the processing time, what is the presentation delay. So you might have seen this, right? Just few slides back. Here we can identify which one of these is three entities is taking time. And it also points out interaction targets that could help us to identify where we have actually, which element or which component has pursued this script. You could say input delay is 15 milliseconds, processing time was quite faster, and presentation delay was also faster. Input delay is 15 seconds means it is still, there is still an opportunity for us to free up the browser thread that could help us to load the application faster. Yeah. Next is about cumulative layout shift. Cumulative layout shifts, you might have noticed this scenario. You wanted to click on an element, accidentally your click has been pursued by some other element. Here in this case, you wanted to cancel an order, but accidentally order got placed, right? So one more thing about, before we get to this, one more thing about interaction to next paint is all about rage clicks. If your application doesn't respond, or if your interaction takes a huge time, you might have done quite a lot of clicks to show your frustration, which will land in drops for conversion. uh, Relevant to that is there is a delay which is over and above 200 millisecond that could land you in layout shift, or probably in some other element perceive the click and it does some other operation which we don't wanted it to do. Here in this case, you see, I don't want to place an order, but unintentionally, due to delays in the application, we ended up placing the order. Basically, the application placed the order since the event has been received by a different element, right? This is a cumulative layout shift. This lands, this is one of the core web vital, third core web vital, which is important for us to identify if any of your assets, any of your assets are loading a bit delay, or how it's actually being, how we could help identify these kind of assets. These kind of layout shifts can be sorted out, or what can lead into these kind of issues. Right? It could be due to, it could be due to images. Again, if you've seen here, we could also basically, in this sample application that we are using here, there is no proper image dimensions being given. If we have given a proper image dimension, probably it might have fetched the resource and it might have reserved a landscape. I mean, it might have reserved a real estate over there, and that loaded properly within that real estate. One, you could progressively load, and next is reserving the width and height, and next one is uh, basically about making sure that the resource loads on time after you reserve a width and height for an image. You can request Contentful or any other CMS that helps in feeding these static contents to for a specific width and height. Instead of getting downloading all the images with a higher clarity, you can also progressively load within that width and height. That solves both the problems of LCP and also CLS. Yeah. So reserving image dimensions, and then also about reserving an ad spot as well, right? Most of the times you might have seen images. Certain ads will push the content down, so you accidentally hitting or clicking on that or interacting with that ad spot, which you don't want it to do, right? So reserving an ad spot as well for a certain application which holds ads is also important, and preferring transform animations. I think the glitch site itself has some glitch. Yeah, I think it loaded now. I'd like to show some difference here. So using these kind of transform animations, what kind of animations your application has also important. It is also important to understand what kind of animations that your application has and how long it takes for your application to perform these animations. And most of the times optimizing these animations will help you to optimize the cumulative layout shift as well. So one is with the transform, one is with top left. Both behaves perfectly fine. So it is important to see what type of basically we wanted to prefer transform animations over over the other one, and how long it takes if you are in a lower network. Uh, can I load the application without animation? How long it takes for your application to load or perform these animations on certain components, right? To keep an eye on animations also helps us to optimize uh, cumulative layout shifts. Yeah, there is a lot of wonderful resources available in web.dev that helps you to identify or learn more about INP. In fact, I learned and experimented whatever I have learned from my portfolio. From my portfolio website. There are a lot of people to follow as well. Some of those that inspired me is John Leon, Addy from Google, and Jeslie from Google as well from the Dev Tools team. So these are the folks who inspired me to learn more about core web vitals and how we could optimize a web application by following certain standards or metrics that Google helps us to look into to optimize your application. Yeah, that's for today, and I hope you folks have a lot of questions. Let me go through.
Thanks, Srini. I'll just pull up the questions onto the screen. So the first question that we have is, which is the best open source tool for web performance?
Cool. Whatever I have showed is all open source. The web performance snippets is something that I have recently loved about. That helps me to identify quite a few things which Lighthouse or page speed insights or Crux, the Chrome experience report doesn't give. So I would suggest to probably try out web performance snippets. And for field data, I mean the real user data, if you have real user monitoring tools that could help you to identify how your application being used by or consumed by your users. So that's the important thing. Lab sometimes performs well, but the field might not be able to probably give us a better report. So it is important to understand how your users are using it.
Thank you. So we have a question from Darshak. If there is a high quality image needed as per the client's requirement, then how we can build that site with good performance?
So as I suggested, probably one is about progressive images, and also about modern extensions like WebP or any other modern extensions will help you to give high quality images with lower sizes. And if you have CMS, that will be wonderful. Maybe Contentful or any other CMS that you can use, that will help you to load progressive images of your own width and height. Instead of loading the complete image sizes, you can load it progressively to give you a better user experience.
Thank you. Bringing the next question up, this is from Jalpa. Are there any regulatory or compliance considerations that we should keep in mind when evaluating web performance metrics, especially in industries like finance or healthcare?
Wonderful. I'm currently working on a preventive healthcare domain. Um in terms of regulations, I would let you folks check if there is any norms. I mean, it depends upon the application that you are also working on, and it depends upon the geography that you are working on. If you are in Europe, check if you are where you are hosting your static assets. Is it uh, GDPR compliant? In my case, currently, there's nothing. It is just that the asset has to be within the geography and within our own uh, CMS.
Thank you. Then we have a question from McKinsey. What are some common mistakes you have encountered in interpreting web performance metrics?
Yep, wonderful question. Based on my experience, I have gone through Lighthouse and understood that we have been performing well. We have optimized our website, but abruptly broken our site when we have looked at actual users data. In past, my team has built an application, and we felt we have been excellent in terms of loading assets, excellent in terms of all the metrics that Lighthouse fetches results are. It's again your environment, but the actual user environment and the way how your users behave on your application, use your application, might be completely different. So it is important to understand how your users are using your application, and tweaking how you could simulate. As I mean, it's not possible to simulate 100%, but at least you can satisfy majority of users. Let's say your users are using your application on a tunnel for a ticket booking web application, right? Let's say, for example, where the network might be poor. So it might not be relevant to test those kind of applications in 5G, 4G. So tweaking your environment is also very important, and understanding as soon as you go live, understanding what does the field data looks like. So don't perceive what Lighthouse says. So it is important to understand page experience report from Search Console, or any of the analytics or real user monitoring tools that you have integrated with your applications with, to know about users' behavior, to know about at least to a percentage, to know about how and which kind of environment they are using your applications on.
Great, thank you. Moving up, we have a question from Damini. How do images and lazy loading techniques influence the largest contentful paint?
Yeah. So fetch priority is one thing that could help you to let browser know that. uh, this is something. This is an important asset I wanted to load upfront. If you communicate this to your browser, then browser takes care of it perfectly fine. And lazy loading is another one where you could defer certain image to be loaded little lazy. And there's another, apart from lazy loading, we also have quite a few techniques in terms of loading as well. Lazy, eager. So probably look at all of these and see what suits best for your environment and such as that. Sometimes we might lazy load all the images, which might be unnecessary. Sometimes we might we might give fetch priority as high for all the images, which means nothing, right? So identifying these differences and when to use what will have a huge impact in terms of LCP.
Thank you. Okay, there is a question from Nusrat. How do I create a snippet to track the metrics? In the presentation, those snippets are already created.
Yeah, I would let you follow this website that could help you to use this across any pages that you are in. I'm just dropping that link. In fact, this is again from a wonderful person that I follow, something that I've learned pretty recently, a couple of months ago. Yeah, and this helps. I mean, there are a lot of scripts available apart from core web vitals. It helps also to identify what is the longest running task in your browser. You can identify those as well through basically through network, but there are wonderful scripts that are available that I would let you experience it. What is taking layout shift loading and interaction. There are scripts to identify, do we have images with lazy and fetch priority high? How do you identify? Is there any non-lazy loaded images available in your application? How do you identify it without going through each and every element in down? What is the best, what is the worst render blocking resource that you have? Is there any third party scripts? Most of our applications are third party scripts, right? For example, analytics comes from a third party and gives us poor user experience most of the times. How do you identify? Is there any other scripts we have? uh, Sometimes lighthouse might not be helpful on these characteristics. So webperf script, snippets have snippets for all of these that could help you to identify majority of this.
Thank you. I'll pick up one more question. So this is from Aishwarya. The question is, with low-code, no-code tools being used to speed up application development, can we use the same aspects, LCP, etc., to check for the performance of a given page?
Yep. If you have control, even if you create a web application using any of the templates or any of the no-code tools available, if you have a control over the code that you have, even though the application is created by XYZ low-code tools or no-code tools, if you still have the control of the code, probably experiment how does your application behaves on actual user environment, and then you can tweak in the HTML and improve the LCP still.
So we just have a minute left. I'll quickly bring up one more question and then we would have to, for the rest of the questions, just want to share that you could reach out to Srinivasan on LinkedIn or via his website. I'll just put a message in the chat. So I think this would be the last question for this session. How do we analyze performance of a streaming web application? This is from Srijit.
It's one of the wonderful question. I had the similar question last night. I was experimenting with Apple's website on, especially on the Mac Tower that Apple has. The Mac Studio that Apple has, right? So the snippet that we have still works out as well. I'm not asking you to experiment it in Apple website. In terms of streaming web application, if it's end of day, it's a video, right? Is there a way we could uh, I mean, is there a way we could push the application, fetch priority for those assets as well upfront, and load based on users network, like like how we have progressive images, progressive videos as well. They load based on users network. That will help. But it's one of the things that is difficult to analyze. Even the INP, right, the interaction to next point is something which is difficult to analyze on these situations and also on mobile as well. So over a period of time, I believe Google will improve on those front. Even though it's going to get stable over a period of time, INP will improve for other modes as well, from not just for desktop, for mobile screen resolutions as well. I think we might find something around these lines for streaming as well over a period of time.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Srinivasan, for such an interesting workshop. That was very insightful. And thank you to our audience for keeping it very engaging. See you soon in the next session, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, Kavya. Thanks for the wonderful opportunity.
You too. Bye. Thank you.